Okay, so long time no update on neoan 3. So let's kind of like look into a little bit of an update, right? So a lot has happened. We are in version 3.1 now, I think, and PHP 8 has become a thing, and a lot of the videos on my channel are kind of like outdated because of that, just because things progress, and what I want to do today is to kind of like simplify down the approach of how to create a RESTful API in the easiest way possible, but yet go into detail enough so there's a little bit of an understanding of what exactly is going on. What I'm going to use for this is not, you probably know that if you follow the, actually, let me go there. If you go to neoan3 rocks, it will kind of like tell you, right, that that there are a couple of requirements that you need to meet. Where is it? And what we're going to use instead, though, is the Vagrant approach. So Vagrant is a little helper tool for virtualization. So what you need installed is VirtualBox and Vagrant. As you can see here, the requirements. And so I already created a project, and the only thing I really need is to get this file here. Do that right now in here. Where's my Vagrant video? There we go. And so what I'm going to do is actually quite simple. I'm going to simply download this file. Now you can do this with all means, right? So what you have now in here is this Vagrant file. That's all there is, right? 18 lines of code in Ruby in that case. And what the only thing I'm going to change is, instead of calling this neoan3 app, so here in the vb.name, I'm going to say JWT demo. And that's already it. And then I'm going to run my commands. So that's going to be Vagrant up. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a new virtualization with a, so Ubuntu Bionic, that's one of the base boxes that's relatively common. That's the Ubuntu, I think, version 16.4, the LTS. So we're going to install that as an image in the virtual machine, then going to set up all the stuff we need. So all the packages, an Apache server, all that kind of jazz. PHP, of course, in version 8. The CLI tools that we need, and last but not least, the framework itself. Depending on your machine, it's going to take a while the first time you run Vagrant up. So if you're not familiar with Vagrant, then have a look at vagrantup.com. It's actually something, since this is going to take a while, might as well have a look at this. So if we go to Vagrant up, what we will see is basically how these things work. And as you can see, it's relatively easy for developers. Yeah, so you have this Vagrant file, and then you simply run Vagrant up. This more or less all there is. Actually, I was kind of like getting started. Let's maybe look at this. Right, a bit of a quick start. So yeah, you need Vagrant, you need VirtualBox, and we don't even need that. And then we run Vagrant up. That's already it. So that's going to yeah, this is really the very high level. I actually remember this to be a little bit more verbose, but that's basically what it is. So when we look at this, let's close that one here. When we look at this, then you can basically open up your VirtualBox if you want to, and kind of like see what's happening. As you can see, this is what's currently the output, so there's not much going on. You can have a look at that while all of the things are installing. Again, depending on your settings, the first time is honestly going to be a little bit, so you know, the Ubuntu is running, so now the rest of the installation starts. We can close that now and kind of have a look at what's happening, right? So now the Apache is installed, bunch of packages here, updates are running, and so on and so on. And what we want to get at, right, just to be clear, is to get a configuration up that is independent from where you run it. So whether or not you use a Mac or Windows or Linux system, like, it really doesn't matter. With those virtualizations, you basically have, you're free of anything. Like your MySQL is set up, your PHP is set up, like it's all done for you. And that makes it very easy to collaborate and very effective as well. Right, I can see that a bunch of Apache modules are loaded. We're going to rewrite the entry point, all of that. And that allows you to work with either, I mean, yeah, we're not going to go too much into detail of the stuff that you can do. What we're going to do is to basically just take care of the authentication process as a JWT endpoint, right? So pure API backend if you want so. Yeah, could have prepared this, but I actually want you to see this live, just so you don't freak out the first time you run this. It's just simply going to take a minute. Downloading SQL Server now. Okay, now we're installing PHP 8 modules. Yeah, a bunch of stuff happening. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I mean, not that it's too interesting, but just so you have an overview of what's happening. Composer and so on, right? Now the neoan3 CLI tool. Okay, so now we're going to start to actually, okay, that's Composer running already. So now we basically start to install the actual app. Okay, and it's already done. So here, this is the IP, you remember, that we have back here. So, and what you can see now is basically that all of this is running. Let me actually get the, get you here at full screen. So this, we can close that one. It's not too interesting. So first thing that we want to do in our case is to run Vagrant SSH to kind of log into the virtual machine. Okay, and what we kind of forgot now is to click on this one. Close the other ones here. Okay. All right. Still kind of fighting here. There we are. From now on, it should go faster. Yep. Okay. Yep. So that's your neoan3 installation. And first things first, we're going to start with a very simple command in order to get a new model created. So I'm going to type neoan3 new model. So this is going to use an MVC structure, and I'm going to say user. Okay, so far so good. So what if you look into model, you can see that we now created a user, and I can here now go to migrate to get to the UI to kind of help me out here. So here you can basically see that's the basic setup that we're dealing with. So I'm going to have a very basic user, right? So it's the ID that's a binary, that's a UUID, that we have an insert date and delete date. That's kind of like how the framework works, so it wouldn't let you actually do anything here. And here we have our custom fields. So one is going to be email, varchar, so we can make that a little bigger, varchar 60 is fine. And then we're going to have a password, and that's going to be 255, right? You can see here how it generates the migration JSON. So none of those should be nullable, and the email should actually be unique. Okay, that's basically it. And then let's go to write out. Okay, this is something that only happens in the virtual environment, that it says safe space found, database updated automatically. Usually you get you have to run neoan3 migrate models up, but in this case it already did that. Assuming that, actually, let me quickly make sure. Cat. So this is something that you credentials dot JSON. I just want to see if that. Okay, yeah, that has been written automatically. Okay, yep. So everything is fine and dandy. So now the big question is, okay, how do we talk to this, right? So I'm going to create a couple of, actually I'm going to create one component. So I'm going to say neoan3 new component auth. Now you can do this, you can simply hit enter here, but I'm kind of like don't want to answer any kind of questions. So a little bit the McDonald's game. So I'm going to do flag t colon API. That's for what type of component is it? It's an API component. And I'm going to say frame demo, which is the environment that comes out of the box. So I'm not going to bother with creating my own frame. I'm just going to use the demo frame as, well, this stuff runs on and so on, right? So that's going to be fine. And that's already it, right? So now I should have a component auth. And let's have a deeper look at that maybe. So in theory, right, we have, so you can see there's a get auth. Make this smaller too. There's a post auth, and that's basically how it comes out of the box, and it kind of like tries to explain what's going on here. We're going to make this very primitive and say, hey, there's just going to be params, if at all, and we're going to directly return them. So which means we don't need this. And the only thing that we're going to do is we're going to use one of the new cool features of PHP 8 and say authorization restrict. And what that's going to do is to basically say, okay, you cannot get to this auth unless you have a valid authorization. So the way neoan3 works is if I have a component auth and it's an API component, then basically I can simply say, I'm going to use the standard API, which is v1, that's the RESTful, and then say auth. And if I hit that, then the GET request gets fired, and as you can see, I get an error unauthorized, which means I do not get to this point, it's already blocked. Now, if I remove this, right now I don't have params, so it should return an empty array, but you can see it works, right? So let's keep this blocked for now. Okay, so far so good. Let's make sure it works. Okay. Now, the header information, of course, is then 401. So we will see that nicely in Insomnia, which we're going to use because instead of a backend, right? So there are a couple of things that we kind of like want to look into when it comes to the post. So what I'm going to say is there is something like an action, and that defaults to login. And there's something like body, right, which is an empty array. Not really sure what this is. Okay. So far, so good. And why do I do this? Well, because I want to use this endpoint to generate basically two things, right? So I want to have an API. Sorry. Oh, come on. What? I want to have an API v1 auth, and that's going to be my login. And I want to have an API v1 auth register, and that's going to be my registration endpoint. So in order to do this, I simply define the basically what comes after the auth naming as a, well, in that case, I called it action, right? You can call this whatever you want. I prepared those endpoints in Insomnia, right? So we have a get auth, that's the one that we currently hit. I can actually call this and I get my, what is this auth get? This returns this, which is actually kind of like interesting, but that's probably because I do have a token that authenticates, which is from a, I should have not prepared that, I guess. Oh, come on, can I not just select all of this? Okay. Where's no auth? Here. Yep, that's fine. Right. As you can see up here, I have a 4.1 unauthorized. Right, that's what I kind of expect. Okay. So let's first take care of the registration process, right? So I can do a simple if and say, okay, if action equals register, is that how I called it? Let's get a little bigger here. Yeah, called it register. So if that's the case, so I have to capitalize this. Don't forget that. And then I say, okay, user will be user model. Create. Actually, let's generate a register here. We're going to place a body. Let's make this simple. So this doesn't exist yet. So the first thing that you have to know about a model is a model needs to be initialized with the provider of database, right? That's the dependency injection. The easiest way to do this is to simply say init model, and then you say user model class in our case, and that's taken care of. Now the next obvious problem is, okay, but this method register doesn't exist, right? So let's create that quickly. So we're going to say public function register, call this credentials. Okay, now the reason why I don't use the regular create is because I want to hash the password, right? So what I'm going to do is to basically say, hey, credentials password equals password hash credentials password, and I'm going to use the password default encoding. Right, let me make it a little bit bigger for you. Okay. All right, access is unused. Yeah, okay, got that one. And if that's done, I'm simply going to say, okay, now call the create with those credentials. So in case you're wondering, the create is one of the magic functions provided by Transform that basically makes sure that if you have like a setup that fulfills how the model itself is set up, then everything else will kind of like be taken care of automatically. Yeah, that's the only thing I need to do. What I probably should do is to kind of like think of whether or not my user is going to gracefully, yeah, so here I kind of need this kind of, you know what, do this outside. That's fine. And I already know that public, actually, no, I remember something. We should probably do this because this generates a $sign, right? So if you want to make sure that whatever value, any kind of hash function or whatever is how that's interpreted by the database, just make an equal sign to make sure that there's no additional evaluation and take it as is basically. Okay, public function login, same thing, credentials, an array. And what is that going to do? So that is going to first find our user, right? So we're going to say self find, and the condition is email credentials email. And at the end here, we're going to return false. Oops. Okay. Yep. That's basically it. And here we are going to say, okay, so now we have that, right? So if not empty user. So the reason we do that is that the find will return an array with results always, right? So basically, I expect now to find exactly one result, but it could be simply an empty array, in which case I basically check of whether or not that's empty. So if that's empty, then the next step I will do is verify the password, right? So now I basically say if password verified. Now we're going to take the import password, right? So that would be credential password, and we're going to compare it to the user. Okay, it's the first one, right? So that's getting us to the stored hash. Then return user 0, right? And then we're going to get that out. That's basically all we need for now. So we have no additional security to basically you know, like hide particular things from the users. That's fine for us now, but keep that in mind before you simply answer the user to the front end or expose it to the API. Right now, the way we're writing it is basically quick and dirty, and in theory, if we just hand off the user, then the password hash is part of that. But for our purposes, it's going to be fine. Okay, so back here, let's first ensure that both of those things are set, right? So what I'm going to do is to say, okay, if not is set, oops, body password, or not is set body email. And this is really not a nice way of writing it, but I just want to show you something, because we can throw those errors manually too. So then throw no route exception, missing key, I'm going to say it's a bad request. Okay, let's add the throw tag, and then it's happy. Okay, so MyID does it automatically. Don't forget, right, when stuff like that happens, that you kind of need to import those things. As you can see, like all of those things I use, I mean, MyID just picks them up, so I don't have to worry about it too much. Okay, now if register, then user is this non-static method. Oh, we probably had a issue here. Oh, did we not just... Oh, same here. Yeah, the models are static in neoan3. That's maybe important. Okay. Then user is this. Yeah. And then do we have the registration cannot be false, can it? Basically not. Okay, so else, this is our login. We would now basically say, okay, so if you are logging in, oops, then our user is user model login body. Okay, now the login itself could fail, right? So we could decide to either do it to work with a try catch block here. Might as well, right? No, you know what? Let's keep that outside of here. So this user now could basically be false, and that basically means that I'm gonna write that in here because login is always going. No, yeah, why not? Why not? Where's my login? Here. Yeah. So I'm gonna either return this or same thing here, right? New route exception authorized. Oh. Okay. So far so good. And then here basically what we want to do is, in both cases, right, we want to generate our JSON Web Token. That's basically the interesting part about this. Okay, so I'm going to call this JWT, and basically going to say this auth assign. You're going to say user ID. Yeah, see, but now this could be, yeah, no, yeah, that's fine. User ID, and then my scope, I'm going to call read write. And my payload, just it's going to be the user email for now, right? There's no reason to store anything in particular on here. And then I return token. My token is going to be JWT get token. Okay. Now this auth, right? So we kind of like completely stepped over the whole procedure of, you know, how does this even work? So do you remember when we just used this frame? So if we actually look at this, right, we will see that we register with some providers here. One of them is the auth provider. Now the auth provider always returns an auth object. So regardless of if you use the JWT wrapper or the session wrapper or whatever else provider you could use, they're in here. We just decided to go for a that's the JWT wrapper is the standard behavior. But now we can basically have the same kind of logic regardless. We can even switch that. Doesn't influence the code that we've written if we later on decide we're going to make this session based. In which case a token makes no sense, but it's a different story. Okay, so let's give it a spin. So this register should now basically be, yeah, email sum2 at email.com. You can see I prepared this. So if I fire this now, let's actually do a couple of things. So first of all, let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this, and then subsequently from this, and create a send. And then I hit the first thing, right? The missing keys. So I need the password to do this. And if I do this, oops, then I actually get a 500 error that I did not expect to happen. We should have hit the registration endpoint. And we have a problem in here apparently. Okay, well, let's set up, yeah, I have not done that with Insomnia before. Let's debug old school. I mean, we're normally using Postman. And we're simply going to set display error to true. Oops. All right. Now, what that should give us is a little bit more clarity of what's happening. Statement not established. Okay. Does look kind of good to me. Let's make sure that the migration worked. All right, look at that. Okay, so regardless of the safe space message that we got, we do need to run neoan3 migrate models up in order to sync that. Okay, so at this point we have the token, right? So we're gonna have, as you can see, this is what we got generated now. So with that token, do you remember if we go to get auth and here click on send, that will not work. But what I can do is I can take this token and I would do this in my front end, right? I set the authorization and then a bearer token. And I'm going to do this here too now and say bearer token and paste that in. And you can see I get my return. This, which is probably, oh yeah, because I sent return this. Okay, little odd picture. Okay. Now, since this is a get call, by the way, right? I don't need to have a body at all, right? I can of course say some value. Whoops, some equals value. There we go. Right, to get this kind of regular behavior for get. Okay, so far so good. Now that's the registration, and basically we can do the same with the login and see if that's working. So if we now send this over, we can see we get the token that was generated, and we can now log in against this. And that's basically already it. Let's now, just to be funny, kind of like just generate a model with posts, right? Yeah, why not? So let's say neoan3 new model post. Okay, now you remember that if we go to migrate now, we can now see that there's a post model, and I'm going to make this pretty simple and say there's a title, and there is content. None of those can be null, and this is probably text. Okay, write out. All right, so we don't trust that, so let's make sure we say neoan3 migrate models up and use testing TB. Okay, so that should be done. And then we basically say, okay, now let's ensure that we have an endpoint for this, or endpoints. Now we're going to say neoan3 new component, let's call it post, why not? Type is API and frame, oops, and frame is demo. Okay, and we should have our, where's it, post here, and here we're going to say, okay, this is actually almost what we want. Let's quickly do a post first. All right. Okay, so what we are going to do here is say init model post model class, and we're going to make this as simple as post model create body, and what we're going to say here is, oh, actually let's make this a little bit more interesting and create a user ID here so we know who, right? So that is a binary 16 in our case, if you remember. Yep, gonna do this. Okay, why do I want to do this? Well, because here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to basically say, hey, we're going to attach the body. So this is going to be a protected route. So we're going to have authorization restrict, and we're going to say our body user ID is this auth. It's just in lowercase, right? Auth is... Oh, wait, do we need to read it? I do need to read it. Okay. User JWT is this auth. Validate. And then I can do stuff like user JWT get user ID. Yep, that should do. And then I create it. Okay. And with the get, we're going to be more gracious. There's nothing needed here in particular. What's going on here? Okay. So the only thing we're going to do here is also load the model, I guess. It's the post model class. And so if there's an ID, otherwise find. Okay. Let's get rid of this stuff here. And here we're going to say then return post model get ID. And here we're going to say post model find params. Okay, so pretty easy. What we're basically saying is if the ID is set, then we're going to get a particular post. Otherwise, we're going to find based on the parameters. Okay, that's relatively it. So let's do this now, right? So let's go to our Insomnia and say, okay, let's create this post. So we're going to have a new request that's going to be create post. It's going to be a post, and it's going to have a JSON type body. Boom. Okay. So as you remember, we require title, which is going to be my first post, and we will require content. Why do I keep doing this? CM so PHP notation. And content is some awesome blog. Okay. And here, it's hopefully going to start suggesting me. Okay. So now let's post to post. Excuse me. Now, as you can see, I did not attach auth, right? Just to test if everything's working. So I'm going to send this over now, and I'm expecting this unauthorized header. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, this is my bearer token. Let's steal that from wherever we had this here. Create post. Place the token in there. And then send this over. Okay, and this is the result, right? As you can see, this is the regular behavior, and you can see, like, now that we don't have to do anything with you know, transforming passwords or hashing or whatever, but it's just like the regular behavior. There's very little code we actually need to write, right? So just a little bit of a reminder, like the whole post basically consists of 3 lines of actual business logic. We didn't touch the post controller at all, right? This was completely auto-generated for us. So just as a reminder, if we go to model post and open that up, here we're using this create, we're using this find, we're using this get. None of those methods we have actually written, right? There's nothing going on here. Okay, So, which basically means now that, and you can see, by the way, there are a couple of, like, there's an insert date, but there's also an insert date stamp, which is in micro time. That's, you know, quite useful for JavaScript if you want to put that into day.js or whatever you use to kind of like display the time. We have our user ID here, right, which is something that we kind of like generated. And as you can see, the user IDs come, even though we store them as binary, they come as strings, so they're converted automatically back and forth. Okay, so that said, let's try to get a post. Let's make a new request. Let's say get post. Yep, and we're going to create that one. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is to paste our auth in here. No, actually, we don't need the auth. Sorry, we said that's not necessary for retrieval. So only thing we need is this. Okay, so what do we expect? Now we expect a list, right? And you can see it's an array of all the different kind of posts, which means if I go back to create post and say my second post, and then shoot that over, you can see I get this one. And if I get all the posts, you can see I now have a list of 2. Now, what we want to do though is to basically say, okay, so we have that as an argument, right? So if I take one of those IDs out, say this one, and send that over, then I get this particular one, right? That's basically the way that this works, and how we kind of like retrieve a particular information if we don't want to have that in the params. And that's basically it. Another alternative would of course be to say, well, what if I don't want to have this in the ID? What if I want to have this passed in as params, as get parameter? You can do, of course, all of that. But that's the topic of another video. Right now, I just wanted to kind of like show you the setup and how you get authentication and everything to work. And needless to say, if you work with this a little bit, you will notice that it's actually pretty fast and how you can develop even relatively complex applications. All right, thanks for watching, and I see you soon.